She was invisible in that house. Every morning, before the sun even rose, she would sweep the marble floors of a mansion that didn't belong to her. Her hands were cracked, her clothes faded, and her face always downcast. Not because she was weak, but because she had learned the hard way that in some homes, silence is survival. Her name was Zoya, but in that house, no one used it. They simply called her Maid, you, or worse, idiot. The owner of the house, Mrs. Meher, a woman wrapped in silk and arrogance, would shout at Zoya for the smallest mistake, a misplaced glass, a slightly dusty corner, or even for simply walking too slowly. Useless girl, Meher would hiss. If I hadn't taken pity on you, you'd still be begging on the streets. Zoya never replied. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't afford to. Her sick mother needed medicine. Her younger brother needed school fees. And her dreams? They were buried beneath the weight of her responsibilities. But even in that silence, something was growing inside her. Not hatred, not revenge, but a fire, a quiet, unshakable fire to rise, not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. Zoya would work from dawn till night, her back aching and her fingers numb. While Meher's children went to private schools and sipped imported juices, Zoya's brother studied by candlelight with secondhand books. Books Zoya bought by skipping her own meals. She ate less so he could eat more. She cried in secret so her mother could sleep in peace. And she tolerated the shouting, the insults, the humiliation, all for the dream that refused to die in her heart. Every time Meher's sharp voice echoed in her ears, Zoya whispered silently to herself, "One day this won't be my life." She started saving whatever she could. A few rupees hidden inside the stitching of her old shawl. Coins dropped accidentally on the floor that no one cared to pick up. Every note was a step toward freedom, and she treated it like treasure. At night, when everyone was asleep, Zoya borrowed the cook's old phone. She watched YouTube videos on business, women entrepreneurship, and how to register a small company. She didn't understand everything at first, but she wrote things down, again and again, until they started making sense. She was learning, in secret, in silence. The world only saw Maid, but Zoya was planting seeds. And slowly, painfully, they began to grow. It began with a small idea. Zoya noticed something at Meher's house, the expensive handmade soaps and scented candles imported from abroad. Every time guests arrived, Meher would proudly display them, pretending they were hers. But Zoya knew better. She had unboxed them, cleaned them, even sniffed them curiously. That's when it struck her. What if I made these here? Locally, naturally, affordably. She started experimenting with soap making on Sundays, her only day off, using basic ingredients, a borrowed stove, and a plastic mold she found in the trash. She began crafting tiny bars of herbal soap. They weren't perfect, not at first. Some cracked, some melted, but she didn't give up. Failure didn't scare her. She had already survived worse. With a small loan from a women's microfinance program, she registered her business, named it Zohia Naturals, a combination of her name and her mother's. Her first customers were neighbors, a few school teachers, and a kind fruit vendor who offered her space on his cart for free. One order turned into 5. 5 became 20. And within 2 years, she had a stall at a local expo. People didn't recognize her at first. She had changed, confident, graceful, with a spark in her eyes that no longer looked down. She now spoke in English and Urdu, gave interviews, and hired other women like her, women who were told they'd never become anything. Her brand became known for quality, purity, and strength. And as money came in, she moved her family out of the slum. Her mother got proper treatment. Her brother started university. But Zoya didn't stop, because in her heart, she knew her story wasn't finished yet. It had been 5 years. 5 years since Zoya had stepped into that marble floor mansion. 5 years since anyone there had shouted her name. 5 years since she had been the maid. Now she stood outside its gate once again, but not as a servant. This time, she was a buyer. The house was up for sale. A financial crisis had hit Meher's family hard. Her husband's business had collapsed. Debts piled up, and luxury turned into liability. The walls that once echoed with pride now stood hollow, covered in silence and unpaid bills. Zoya's real estate agent hadn't told her the owner's name. She didn't ask. She wasn't buying it for revenge. She wanted it for business, to turn it into a women's empowerment center. But fate had its own plans. When the door opened, it was Meher, older now, paler. No makeup, no silk, just tired eyes and trembling hands. For a moment, both women froze. Zoya recognized her immediately, but Meher didn't. She looked at Zoya like she was any other buyer, until Zoya softly said, "It's a beautiful house. Brings back a lot of memories." That voice, that face. Meher blinked in disbelief. Zoya? Zoya nodded. Calm, polite. Meher's face turned red, then pale, then red again. Shame covered her like a storm. Her eyes welled up. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. But Zoya held up her hand gently. "No need," she said with a soft smile. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here with an offer." Meher was speechless, silent. The silence she once forced on Zoya now hung over her like judgment. The table had turned completely. Zoya sat in the same living room where she once stood silently holding a mop. Now, she sat confidently across from Meher, dressed in elegance, her file of documents neatly placed in front of her. Meher couldn't stop staring. The girl she had once insulted now held the power to buy everything she once owned. "I'll purchase the property at the market rate," Zoya said calmly. "No need to lower the price. I know its value." Meher hesitated. Her lips trembled. "Why?" she finally whispered. "After everything I said to you, everything I did, why would you help me?" Zoya looked at her for a moment. Then, gently, she replied, "Because when you shouted at me, I learned how to be silent. When you looked down on me, I learned how to look up. When you gave me nothing, I found everything in myself." She paused and smiled softly. "You were part of my journey, not because you were kind, but because you taught me exactly how I never want to treat anyone." Tears rolled down Meher's cheeks. She lowered her eyes, the same eyes that once looked at Zoya with disgust, now filled with shame and regret. Zoya stood up to leave. At the door, she turned once more. "I'll renovate this place and use it to train women, maids, widows, single mothers, to help them become financially independent, just like I did." And then she added quietly, "No woman should be made to feel as small as I once did, not when she carries a universe of strength inside her." With that, she walked away, not in anger, not in pride, but in peace. Because Zoya didn't win by crushing others. She won by lifting herself. And that is a victory far greater than revenge. Months passed. The old mansion, once filled with scolding voices and cold pride, was now alive with laughter, learning, and light. Where once Zoya had scrubbed floors in silence, now dozens of women sat in neat rows, learning how to run businesses, speak with confidence, and dream beyond survival. Zoya named the new center Umidgar, House of Hope. Every brick was a symbol. Every corner held a memory. But now, those memories were reshaped by purpose. Women came from slums, broken marriages, abusive homes, and found not just training, but dignity. They learned how to create handmade products, manage finances, and even pitch their ideas to real investors. Some cried during their first sessions. Others trembled when they spoke aloud. But Zoya encouraged them the way no one ever encouraged her. "I know what it feels like," she'd say, "to be called nothing. But let me tell you, you're more than something. You are everything." And the world noticed. Magazines started featuring her story. News anchors called her the woman who rose without revenge. Young girls quoted her words on social media, and investors lined up to fund her mission. One day, during a national award ceremony, Zoya was honored as a champion of change. She walked on the stage in a simple, graceful dress, no diamonds, no arrogance, only pride earned through pain. And as the applause thundered around her, she looked out into the crowd and saw Meher, not sitting in VIP rows, but in the audience, quietly, humbly clapping. Her eyes glistened with emotion, Not jealousy, not bitterness, just awe. Zoya smiled gently. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. Because by now, Meher understood what Zoya had always known. That real strength doesn't shout. It rises quietly, steadily, and with grace. Some stories end with revenge, some with regret, but the most powerful ones end with growth. Zoya's story was never about payback. It was about purpose. She didn't need to yell back. She didn't need to make anyone feel small, because she had learned that dignity isn't proven by shouting louder. It's shown by rising higher. The same walls that once confined her dreams now echoed with her voice. The same hands that once served tea were now shaking hands with CEOs and ministers. And the same girl who once stood silently in a corner now stood as a light for thousands. Zoya had become what no one expected. And that's exactly why her story mattered. To every girl scrubbing dishes in silence. To every boy running errands instead of playing games. To every soul who's ever been told they are nothing. Zoya's journey whispers. They don't decide who you are. You do. So the next time someone looks down on you, smile, not because they're right, but because they have no idea who they're talking to. And one day, they just might find themselves standing in the very line to shake your hand